Hey everybody, Cole here with Classic Mini DIY, and on today's episode we're going to be talking about a brand new product that I just launched on the store. It is a do-it-yourself engine bracket so that you can mount your engines, your A-Series engines, to standard engine stands. Really excited about showing this to you guys. We're going to update my engine stand and then show you guys how to do it on yours. So you won't want to miss it. Stay tuned for that. Now you guys know I have been building engines on this channel for almost a decade now, and I've used a kind of rudimentary, really basic engine stand modification to mount engines to a standard style engine stand. And in truth, that has worked just fine over the years, but I wanted to make something that worked a little bit better and that supported both A and A+ engines. So that is where my brand new hybrid engine stand adapter comes in. This is a do-it-yourself weld-on plate. It comes with 6 spacers to allow you to kind of stand this off of your engine block to make sure everything clears nice and easy. This has also been formulated with the offset on the side here to centralize the weight and the pivot point when you're rotating this engine over on the engine stand. Now, I can talk about this until my face goes blue, but I think it is probably better for me to show you guys just how this works by modifying my existing engine stand, removing the rudimentary one that I have on there now, so that you guys can see how this mounts to your A-Series engines and will make engine building much easier. All right, so let's talk about version 1. And let's zoom you in a little bit so you can get a better look at this. Now, version 1 is a standard JEGS engine stand that I have essentially cut down and modified to make kind of suit the Classic Mini. Now you can see here it's a little goofy. It doesn't quite hold the engine steady. And if we take this pin out, you can see that's kind of how it wants to sit, which is not the end of the world. I mean, you normally have a pin in here holding it in place, but we want this to be a little bit nicer and to really kind of suit the engine for those of you who don't want to modify an existing one like this. So how do we do that? Well, before we do, I just want to take a moment to appreciate the beauty of this engine. This is the 1100 stroker build that I am in progress building. There's a separate video that will be coming out on this, so don't worry. I am going to show you guys everything that's going on here, but a little sneak peek for you. Now to modify our existing plate here, we're going to need to get this engine off the stand. So I'm going to pull this off. I'm going to set it on my workbench. We're going to take this stand off. Okay, so with this off, you can kind of see what this looks like. Have 2 bolts that go down into the oil filter housing mount, and then one that goes in up here at the top. This is going to shift a little bit once we, put our new stand on here. So let me go ahead and whip these bolts out, and we'll compare the 2 plates. Now, something I want you to watch when I take this off is all of the spacers that fall off of this, because that's something important to note with our new engine stand. Okay, so this is one of the things that the new plate is really going to help improve. So we have our engine stand adapter. You can see that's this right here from this retaining ring back is our factory plate and factory mount. This is what comes with a JEGS setup. And then this metal piece right here used to be a big square. Now it is much smaller. I cut it down. I spent a lot of time doing this. And then you can see I had to step those holes up over time to get them just right. Now, before we get into cutting this and welding this, I do want to take just a minute to remind you guys that this is a stand that's going to be holding a ton of weight. A fully loaded engine from a Classic Mini is about 500 pounds, and it's not something that you want to mess around with. So if you're at all nervous about welding this, or you don't feel like your welder might be up to the task, I definitely recommend bringing this to a licensed welding shop. I suspect that anyone you bring it to is probably going to be really keen on helping you guys out with this. It's a pretty cool project. It's a cool thing to work on. And, you know, welding shops, automotive shops, everybody loves a Mini. So just wanted to get that out there. Wanted to mention it. But let's go ahead and whip this off. It's going to be pretty simple. We're going to cut this old one off. We're going to want to make sure we retain the retaining ring, because we are going to reuse that to make sure that it steps off of the engine stand nicely. And aside from that, just going to put it in there. Actually, one more thing before we get started. I actually found one of the original engine plates that I purchased because I used to modify these and sell them, but ended up being really not cost effective. This is what the plate looked like. So you can see this is how it ended up, and this is really where it started. So I'm actually going to modify this one because I have it here and I might as well. And we'll go ahead and cut this off, go ahead and get it all set up the way it needs to be set up, and weld the new one on. All right, so you can see lots of cutting, a little bit of grinding. Now we have just the tube for our new engine stand. And let's go ahead and grab the plate. Should look pretty cool. You can see. And now it's your job as the welder to make sure that you line up everything and get it exactly where you want it. Also give yourself clearance on all the sides to lay down a really good bead. But that's pretty much it. Okay, so we have our engine stand kind of prepped and ready for welding. Now you can see I've got it in the orientation it needs to be. So this is the engine stand side. So this goes into the engine stand. And you'll notice that the oil filter housing is here on this bottom right side. And the two wings are kind of off to the right, pointing up. You're going to want to make sure that you do this right, because if it's backwards, it's not going to work at all. So all of the kits that we are sending out to people will be marked on the side that you need to weld your plate onto, just to make it a little bit easier. Now for my engine stand, which I want my adjustment rod, the one that you use to actually like rotate the engine around, I want that to be vertical when the engine is in its normal position. This is just the way I like it. You're more than welcome to weld this however you'd like on your setup. So we've got that slightly oriented there. We can give ourselves a little bit of room. And you'll notice I etched this down here so that we can get good, nice penetration. I'm going to tack this in a few places so it doesn't wiggle around. And then we're going to weld it up nice and true. So aside from that, there isn't really anything to do except get to it. Now, I'm by no stretch of the imagination a good welder. You can probably see that. But we've got good penetration on this side. The first side, kind of shitty. I'm going to go back through there and cut some of this off and redo that. But once we do, I should be able to, I kind of got the hang of it, get this all cleaned up. And with the kind of weld puddle that I have on there, the excessive amount of weld, I probably won't need that retaining ring. It's going to space it off enough so that it clears the engine. I also just need to open up this hole just a little bit because that's not going to clear. But other than that, things are looking pretty good. All right, so now it's time for the fun part, and that is mounting this back up. Or at least I'm going to show you guys how to mount this. So this goes right here, and you can see that lines up with the holes for the generator on the pre-A+ engine or the alternator on the A+ engine, and your oil filter housing. Now these kits will come with a collection of 6 spacers, and you'll use these in a few different scenarios. So for pre-A+, like this one, you're only going to need 2 spacers here and here, which means there and there. On the A+ engine, they added a bunch of additional ribbing on the body of the engine right here. And unfortunately, in order to keep the pivot point on our engine stand in the right place, it does interfere with this little part of the engine. So for A+ engines, you're going to need all 6 spacers. You'll put 2 on the oil filter housing down here, and then you'll put 4 on the alternator up there. Now, if you have the hybrid plate like this one here, I would recommend not welding these in place. I'd keep them separate. It's just going to make your life a little bit easier. If you have one of the engine plates that is made only for A+ or pre-A+, then I would actually go ahead and weld these spacers in. It's going to make your life easier, and you don't have to find any spacers when you're trying to mount up your engine. So before we mount this up, I do want to put a coat of paint on this, just tart it up a little bit, and then we'll be ready to put it back up on the engine. Alrighty, so we've got a lick of paint on this. It's looking really good. Now you can see my welds are not the most amazing thing on the planet in terms of like how they look, but they're solid. It's going to hold it really nice. So now we can mount this back to our pre-A+ engine, which means that we will have only 2 spacers on the upper ones here. But actually, why don't we take this over to an A+ engine, and I can show you guys how this looks on that engine. So this is kind of what I was talking about. You can see these holes right here are farther this direction towards the end of the engine, which is where our new engine stand comes in handy, because now you don't have to change out your engine stand, you just swap over the bolts. This right here, and specifically this casting right here, is what prevents us and requires us to need additional spacers. But there you guys go. A little comparison, A+, and of course the pre-A+ engine that we're going to put this back on. Now check that out. The engine is in place, and you can see already just from changing that pivot point location how much better this sits on the engine stand. I did unfortunately weld it on just a little crooked still, so it's a little bit of a slope, but not the end of the world. So with that in place, we'll go ahead and put our locking pin in there. It's actually considerably easier to rotate as well, which makes sense now that it's on there. Seems very obvious. Okie dokie, so that is going to wrap up this episode of Classic Mini DIY. As I said, short little episode, nothing too fancy, but I'm really excited about these plates. And if you guys want to help support the channel, but also support Classic Mini DIY in general, these plates are now for sale on the store. And as a special introductory launch of this video, I'm going to be doing 10% off for the next 48 hours. And then from that point on, they'll go up to full price, which I think is still quite reasonable. If you guys have any questions whatsoever, feel free to post those in the comment section below. I'll be happy to help you out. But until I see you guys on the next episode on this 1100 and we start building it up, I hope you guys have a really great day. And you know the drill. Enjoy those minis and motor on. See you guys.